Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about Pascal's wager and why it's a terrible epistemological standard. So Pascal's wager is basically the idea that if you believe in God, he's either real or not real. And if he's real, you go to heaven, which is a great thing. But if he's not real, well, then you just die. And then nothing really happens after that. And if you don't believe in God and he's real, you go to hell. But if he's not real, it's basically the same thing than if you do believe, you just die and it's done. So they basically use this argument to say that, oh, just believe in God, just be safe with this, take the safe bet, regardless of the fact that there's many different gods that you could believe in, and all of these different gods, or most of them, say that if you believe in a different God, then you're going straight to hell. But regardless of that, that's their basic argument for believing in a God in general. And this sets up a terrible epistemological standard because it basically tells you to accept the arbitrary for absolutely no reason other than the potential consequences of accepting the arbitrary. And it basically gives the existence of a God the same weight as the non-existence of a God. The issue is the existence of a God is impossible. God does not exist. There's no such thing as the supernatural. I've gone into this in other videos, but if you want to look into more of this, it's not that hard to figure out. As long as you're not being evasive and you're being honest, it's really, really easy to realize that God doesn't exist if you're being honest with yourself. But I get that some people are honestly confused on this, and they have a lot of rationalizations, and it's very automatized in their subconscious. I was there before, so I understand that. But the issue is God is a completely arbitrary assertion, and he goes against every single law of reality. So to give his reality the same weight as his non-reality in this sort of 2x2 matrix that they talk about with Pascal's wager is absolutely absurd. God is not very likely to be real. And then another thing is there is a consequence to believing in the arbitrary. That's a major consequence because you are setting up as an epistemological standard faith. You're saying that faith is a proper epistemological standard, so you can basically believe anything if you want to. That's basically what you're doing in your mind. You're setting up that as an epistemological standard, and it stops you from being able to live in reality and be able to know reality and understand true knowledge. You're basically just accepting an arbitrary assertion, even though it's arbitrary, and you know it's arbitrary because if you didn't think it was arbitrary, you wouldn't have to go through this weird Pascal's wager logic, like where it's like, oh, I'll just believe in God as the safe bet, even though there's absolutely no possible reason to believe in him. So you're literally just setting up the arbitrary as a standard for you epistemologically, and that ruins your mind because to think and to know reality, we need to form concepts starting at the perceptual level and base everything that we believe off of that. If you come up with some completely arbitrary belief and you hold that as true, you're going to be able to hold just about anything as true, and you're basically you're going against what's necessary for human knowledge, which is a hierarchical knowledge based on perceptual concretes at the foundation. And the issue with accepting the arbitrary is there's literally nothing you can do with that. All it can possibly do is warp your current hierarchy, because you can't, like, it's not something that you can disprove, because proof requires basically building up from the perceptual level, and to disprove something, you need to essentially cut off that chain. You need to show that no, there is a mistake that you made in this chain of going from perceptual level to lower concepts to higher concepts. You made some mistake in this process. So that's basically what proof is to show that these sort of lower concepts and how they build up to these higher concepts. And to disprove something is to show that no, these lower concepts are irrational or they're arbitrary, and then you can throw them out. But the issue with a completely arbitrary concept like God is that it's completely arbitrary. There's no basis for proof. There's no proof that you can disprove. I mean, there's obviously the 5 rationalizations for God's existence, 5 proofs of God's existence. Sorry, but yeah, they have their rationalizations, but those are really easy to disprove, and those those rationalizations show just this misunderstanding of what metaphysics is, and they're really confusing. They base themselves on things that seem very true, but they try to apply them in ways that they cannot be applied. They try to apply them to being itself, to existence itself, and that doesn't make much sense. But anyways, Pascal's wager, it sets the arbitrary as a possible, like, epistemological standard, and you cannot accept the arbitrary. You can't, like, that ruins your mind. You're basically, by doing so, you're autonomatizing the idea that you can accept something by faith, that you can believe something with absolutely no evidence, and that ruins your entire standard for believing in anything, because, like, why or what reason is it, why is it that you can accept this thing arbitrarily but not this other thing arbitrarily? That's just another arbitrary reason, just because I feel like I want God to exist, or I feel like like it's an entirely emotional argument, like, if I die I want to go to heaven, and I feel like that would be better, and it's an entire whim-based argument, this Pascal's wager thing. And you're basically setting that this sort of arbitrary standard for deciding whether or not to accept the arbitrary or not to accept the arbitrary, and then you can't distinguish between that because it's a completely arbitrary standard. It's completely meaningless. I hope that made some sense. That got really abstract really quickly, but I hope you can understand that. You can't accept things arbitrarily, and you can't, because it leads you to having a bad epistemological standard and being willing to accept other things arbitrarily. And when you autonomatize the idea that you can accept things arbitrarily, you're not going to come to good beliefs, because it leads you to accepting other things like that. And you can't hold these sort of contradictions in your mind like that. It leads to a lot of mental distortions, and it leads to bad mental health to an extent too, because if you don't know why you know things, and you don't know what you can know and how you can know things, your mind becomes so much more unclear, and things become so much less clear. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.